What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be ranking every single coaster at Dorney Park in Allentown, Pennsylvania. So let's get right into it. Okay, starting off at number 7, this is Woodstock Express. This is the exact same model and layout as Coca Cruiser at Hershey Park and Little Devil at Six Flags Great Adventure. This is a Zamperla family gravity coaster. It's a family coaster. I just wrote it for the credit. There's not much to say about it. Obviously, as it's the exact same layout and stuff as, it's a clone coaster, it's a kiddie coaster, so there's not much, to say about it. So moving on to the next coaster. Okay, number 6 is Wild Mouse. This is a Mal Rides Wild Mouse. Of course, this is, your classic Wild Mouse. There's not much to say about this. In my opinion, obviously Wild Mouses aren't my favorite coasters, but they're not my least favorite coasters either. I don't hate them as much as some people that shall not be mentioned. But yeah, that's all to say about Wild Mouse. Moving on to the next coaster. Okay, now we're starting the top 5. Number 5 is Thunderhawk. This is a PTC wooden coaster. Fun fact about this coaster, when it first opened, it was like an out and back style roller coaster, like the first half of the coaster. And then later on, in later years, they added the second part of the coaster, the twistery section. It's not necessarily a twister, but it has like a few helixes and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a fun fact. Originally, it was just one half, and then later on, they added the second half. As for this coaster, I enjoyed it. It's not the best wooden coaster, of course, but it's a fun coaster. Of course, it's a classic PTC coaster. There's not a lot of talk about it. And I would also like to mention, before we move on, I've only been to Dorney Park once, and that one time I went, I've only been on all of the coasters once. So I definitely need to go back to, get more of like, oh yeah, this coaster is definitely better than this coaster, to feel like I have a good ranking. Right now, it is a bit iffy, like, oh, one day I could throw around, oh, this is the best coaster at Dorney Park. The next day I might think a different coaster is the best coaster at Dorney Park. But yeah, that's all for number 5. Moving on to number 4. Okay, number 4 is Hydra the Revenge. This is a B&M floorless coaster, and this is one of only 2 roller coasters in the world with a JoJo roll, which is a Heartline roll right out of the station. That part of it, in my opinion, is probably the best part of the ride. That hang time you get on that. Like, you get more hang time on that than on hang time at Knott's Berry Farm. Not that I've ridden it, but I'm just saying. But this coaster does have one bad thing about it. It has a horrible rattle, a B&M rattle. It's not necessarily rough, it's just like that rattle. It gives me a headache, and I want to like this coaster. I love the layout. I want to like it. It's just that rattle. Like, it just puts it down so far in my rankings. But yeah, there's not a lot to say, so moving on to the next coaster. Okay, number 3 is Talon. This is a B&M Invert. I'm not the biggest fan of B&M Inverts. Don't get me wrong, I like them. It's just, I don't like them as much as some people. I definitely prefer other rides. But yeah, this is a fun ride, of course. I don't necessarily have a favorite part of this ride. Of course, that helix at the end is pretty fun. But other than that, yeah, this is just, a B&M Invert. In this area of the country, there's a lot of B&M Inverts. I mean, there's Great Bear at Hershey Park, Talon at Dorney Park, Batman the Ride at Six Flags Great Adventure. There's just a lot of B&M Inverts. So, I'm not the biggest fan of inverts, but yeah, it's a fun coaster. And of course, my favorite part of this ride is probably that helix at the end. So yeah, moving on to number 2. Okay, number 2 is Possessed. This is an intimate impulse coaster. A lot of other people you see probably will put this further down in the ranking at Dorney Park, but I really enjoy the intimate impulse coasters. I think they're underrated. Of course, if you don't know what an intimate impulse coaster is, it's an inverted shuttle coaster that's launched. Of course, this one doesn't have the brakes at the top of the spike like some of them, but it's an intimate impulse. I enjoy these. Obviously, there's not a lot to say about it because it's an intimate impulse coaster. Of course, if you don't know what it is, it has 2 spikes on either side of the shuttle. One has like a spiral, and the other one is just a straight spike. But yeah, moving on to number 1. Okay, number 1 is Steel Force. This is a Morgan hypercoaster. I really enjoy this. Of course, when you first go out, this is basically an out and back coaster, as a lot of the hypers are. When you first go out, there's not a lot of airtime, but on the return run, on like the second half of the ride, there is a lot of airtime, like ejector airtime. So I really enjoy this coaster. It's definitely underrated, as is a lot of the coasters at Dorney Park. Like, Dorney Park is a great park. If you haven't been there and you're in the area, I highly suggest going to Dorney Park, because they have a lot of good coasters. For Steel Force, obviously, yeah, the beginning doesn't have a lot of airtime, but the second half of the ride does. Proper ejector airtime. So I really enjoy this coaster. But yeah, there's not a lot to say about it. Because as I said, I've only been on all of the coasters at Dorney Park once, so I really don't have a lot to say about them. But once I get back there, I'll probably get back there next year. I probably won't be there this year, but next year I'll definitely be back, because they're adding this new B&M dive. But yeah, that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you like and share, and I'll see you in the next video.